You're tuning in to Neurodiversity, a podcast for neurodivergent adults and the people who love them. Please note that this podcast does not substitute medical or professional diagnosis and advice. What's up, lovers and friends? Okay, today we're going to jump into my medical experiences, or more so experiences with trying to find diagnoses and providers to identify and manage my neurodivergent difficulties. So as I'm gonna jump into that, I think before I jump into that, I just want to say too something I really didn't acknowledge. I think self-diagnoses can be helpful for advocacy, like I said, just for like awareness. Also, because it's hard to find, medical professionals who are well versed in adult presentations, female experiences, or professionals who are going to take the step back from their specialty. So, if they're specialized in like neuropsych, or they're specialized in, this particular part of the diagnosis, is going to take a step back and like look at the broader picture. So really look at those different domains that autistic people may struggle, which part of that is like physical, right? And physical health and things like that, and other commonalities, such as, how things happen during puberty, blah, 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 blah. Eating disorders, those are really big parts in like the diagnostic process, in my clinical opinion, from what I've been able to read and been trained on. So it's hard to find someone like that. But one piece that I really didn't mention also is just accessibility financially. It's accessibility in your area. Does someone even specialize in this? I think in the Midwest, I guess I can only speak for Ohio for sure. It's difficult, especially in the Cleveland area. And Cleveland in general, just side note, has some of the worst outcomes for Black women in healthcare. That's like another note. But if you went somewhere like, LA, where the majority of autistic adults in the US live, there might be more access to, and I'm guessing, I'm speculating, but it might be easier access to professionals in that area who do have these specializations. But I'm sure cost is still a factor. And so when you talk about a full like neuropsych eval, that's going to run you thousands of dollars often. It's hard, and diagnoses too is just like the first step. It's not like you're gonna like. I guess in my experience, it's not the first step, but I guess still coming to that realization that I fit. I resonate with this population, right? That was still my first step. That diagnostic piece, whether it's self-diagnosis or official diagnosis, like it's just the first step. And like an official diagnosis in itself isn't necessarily going to solve your problems. Like I think that, again, it can really help with self-compassion. It can really help with reframing your experiences. It can really help with being more aware. So the more awareness that you do have of the difficulties that you're struggling with, the more granular you can get with your responses and like how to manage them. So just real quick, something that one of the first books I listened to after kind of saying, okay, this autism criteria really like matches with my life experience, was What to Say Next. And it was, it's written by an autistic woman. And the part I really focused on was more so like what was going on at work. She also talked about parenting and some other things. But her work experiences like really resonated with me, and just like not knowing what to say to emails, like being just so drained and so perplexed, like how to respond to certain things, like in emails, or even just to my coworkers, just being so, I don't know if repulse is the right word. I don't know what the right word is. I don't know what the right feeling word is, but just like this small talk culture at work, and when you got to check in and people just want to chit chat throughout the day. I'm like, I'm behind on my notes. Like I'm like 2 weeks behind on these notes. Like I don't have time to chit chat with you. like, I didn't come here for that. Like, I came to work to get paid, and I really got to talk about my work experiences because like I've always been like that and really like putting things in boxes without a lot of flexibility. Like at my first couple jobs, like I barely talked. Um, and then my very first job, like I had a coworker had to come talk to me about a specific behavior that I'm not going to share publicly, but like I didn't know that there was anything wrong with it, like until they told me. Um, so that was really, yeah. Anyway, so again, losing my train of thought a little bit, but yeah, just like looking at work. What was I gonna say about that? Oh, the book. Okay, the book. Yeah. So in the book, like there was this. She really talked about like social collateral, and really kind of putting that into context and like why it's important, like how it can help, like yada yada yada. And it really like helped me to understand small talk or just some like office norms and things like that. Where now I can understand like why people thought I didn't like them, which stuff would happen at one of the last agency jobs I worked at before I left. Like couple of women came up and like confronted me about like not liking them, which was interesting. In and of itself, on just like how I just had a lot of conflict at work and also poor work performance in that last job. So that book really helped me out a lot in that kind of sense. So yeah, I just say that to say like I would have never sought out that information. I really understood that it was something with me. Like before, I thought it was just like something was wrong with like the system and like the way the company was ran, and it was like all their fault. And like my boss sucked, and like the building manager sucked, and like everyone sucked. And while I do think some people did kind of suck, I also can now realize like, okay, but also I interpreted some things differently than maybe like they were meant, and just didn't understand some things that really contributed to my difficulties at work. Like some of that stuff had to do with me and the way I show up in the world, which I was not aware of at the time. So yeah, so getting a diagnosis can be really helpful, and self-diagnosing can be really helpful in that regard. But yeah, official diagnosis, like I said, finding someone who's actually like competent in this work and in these really specific and granular, heterogeneous presentations, difficult. Accessibility and cost, again, very difficult. So when we talk about self-diagnoses, like sometimes that's all people can do, and if that's something that is um, helpful for you, then do what you got to do. I think just be humble about it and be open to, the fact that maybe you don't have like the skill set to like actually diagnose this. And like, yeah, maybe someone else, hopefully someone credible, would tell you, okay, well, if you don't have this, this is what I think is actually presenting. And so, like, um, you'll hear more about this in the second episode, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it out here now with one doctor that I just recently saw. They did not provide like the differential piece. And so what I mean by that is like they did say like they saw a lot of anxiety, which is true. And I endorse that. I've been diagnosed with that. I've had difficulty managing anxiety my entire life. But I don't think we got to the root of that. But that's not the point. The point is that um, they they would just say that, like just the anxiety part, but they ignored like all my sensory issues. Like they ignored my restrictive repetitive behavior and interests. And so like even if they didn't feel like it was autism, like there are other diagnoses like under the neurodevelopmental disorder section of what we the diagnostic manual that we use that maybe might have been more appropriate, but like didn't even look at those. So like for instance, if I see somebody who has like difficulty with social communication and some other very specific criteria that I won't get into right now, but they don't have restrictive repetitive behaviors, then like maybe they have like what's called like a pragmatic language disorder or condition, if you want to say that, and things like that. So like there are other diagnoses that can be appropriate if you feel like everything doesn't match up to say mean ASD or ADHD or whatever, but to just give a diagnosis that ignores like a shit ton of other symptomology, that's not cool. And yeah, I think to find once again, I know I'm a broken record, but to find a professional who is truly going to do that work come far and few in between. So I'm here with you in solidarity to my self-diagnosed people, and I hope that maybe it's the self-diagnosis and your investigation on that alone may help you. Or I also hope that you can find qualified professionals to help you figure that out. Because doing it on your own sucks and it's very lonely. And I can say that from personal experience. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of people to talk to about it because not a whole lot of people get it. And some people don't even want to get it, they don't want to talk about it. So that's a thing in of itself. All right, here is part one of my medical experiences in this self diagnosis little saga. So that's just like why I feel comfortable or decided to kind of take that step and go ahead and share my experiences. I don't feel that everyone who's self-diagnosed has to like have that extensive kind of background or skill set. However, I do feel like it's very important that you take your self-diagnoses to professionals. But I really do understand like how hard that can be. And that's what we are going to get into this time around. Okay. So I want to see like okay, part of me wants to go backwards because like the most recent one happened to me most recently, and I'm like all fired up about it. But I think we'll just start from the beginning for the sake of everyone's sanity. So in the beginning, once I went through, the great I don't even remember what I called it. Honestly, I gotta look back at my show notes or whatever. But the Great Unmasking. So yeah, like when I went through like the Great Unmasking, and then just kind of like that difficulty adjusting period, that burnout period. Um, I started to seek diagnosis and like really was needing help because like my life was on fire. My life was on fire, and I had like no energy. I had so little energy to fix it. Like yeah, it took me months, but slowly but surely things did get better. Anyway, I started with a PCP that I used to see, and I am in Northeast Ohio, and so like, yeah, it's the Midwest. I think that might just be enough said. But anyway, I yeah, I was at a major hospital system here that I don't really recommend after these experiences, but also for other reasons. But anyway, I saw this PCP, and I went in about concerns around my allergies, like concerns about like auditory processing and just sensory issues that I was having that were just really driving me fucking nuts. And yeah, and just like concerns around autism that by this time I was like, okay, like I had found some little cross information to even start to consider that. So I went to this PCP. And first of all, like I felt like they were just kind of like dismissive, like a bit like quick. They were trying to get me out. And in hindsight, I now know why part of that is, which I recently learned in the last year at 30, that you only get 15 minutes at the doctor. I didn't know that before. No one told me about that at light in life. So oftentimes I've been really frustrated and feeling like dismissed at the doctor. And again, maybe that's something to talk about more later. But anyway, so yeah, I felt like that. But so this is what the doctor gave me. She gave me a referral to this hospital's autism clinic. She gave me a referral to the auditory department and also a referral to psychiatry. Um, and then I also tried to go through ophthalmology through this hospital system, but the referral didn't come from her. So that's just a side note. But okay, so I go to this appointment. I'm just like, whatever, like not much happened from it, but also like this person, I didn't feel like they handled it great or like how I would have wanted them to. They also aren't specialists. So I'm like, they gave me the referrals, bada bing, bada bang, whatever. So, psych, let's just do that quick because it's the quickest. So this was like, I want to say September of 2021. Their psych department didn't have an intake appointment until the end of December. So that is October, November, December. 3 months. That's 3 months of waiting for an initial appointment. And then they also told me in their initial appointment, You're not prescribed any meds. You don't get to see like the doctor for prescriptions until like I think they said 2 to 3 months after that. So I got referred in a moment of crisis to a psych department who could not intervene and could not actually like help me and improve my quality of life for about 8 fucking months. How is that helpful? It's not. It's not. It's very frustrating. Um so then the auditory part. So this PCP sends in the auditory referral. I scheduled the appointment. I have to wait. I think that was also in December, so or maybe the end of November. So I had to wait like 2.5 months for that appointment. I get there. The person in the auditory department doesn't really know why I'm there. They're like, "Oh, why are you here today?" Blah blah blah. So I tell them, I'm like, "Oh, we don't do that here. Like, we can't do that." And like, no one in the area really does it. They did tell me one place that might do it, and that it would be private pay or whatever. And like, I'm just pissed. I'm just pissed on so many levels because it's like, one, PCP, why did you refer me here if they don't even like address my issue? Do you not know that? So there's just so much like disintegration even within hospital systems. And so I acknowledge this isn't just like an individual's fault. It is a systematic issue that is really fucking frustrating. But yeah, I go there. They can't even do what I want. All they do is check hearing. I have great hearing. I know that. The test proved that. And as much as I wanted to leave and like walk out, I was just like, all right, well, I'm here now and I might as well just have my hearing, checked. So great hearing, that goes well. But I'm just really upset because I'm really in this time. I'm very much in the shit. I'm in the muck. I'm in the struggle. Um, so it was just very frustrating that this isn't really getting me a step closer, or at least it felt like that, right? And also, it just feels like I'm not being listened to because why did you send me here? And also, like, auditory person, did you not read the referral? Did no one in audiology read the fucking referral before you like made the appointment? Like, or but like no one read it and said, oh, we actually can't do this. Like, let's cancel it. No, you'll just come. You'll have to pay your copay. You'll have to pay whatever this costs. You'll have to spend your gas and waste your time to come here for us to tell you that the thing you specifically requested, we don't do. Okay. So, and then like, anyway, the auditory personnel, they were saying like maybe I had tinnitus or whatever, which is kind of like upbringing of the ears. And I'm just like, no, that's not what I experience. Like I'm hearing sounds. They're just very like the frequency of them, I guess, is very high typically. Like, and this is like not in places with a lot of background noise. So if I'm like in a quiet environment, just like little sounds from like the refrigerator or like the heater will bother me, or even like so small, like air coming out of a 2 liter bottle or like, a pop bottle because it's not closed all the way. I'm just like, what is that noise? I'm like, it might take me a little bit to find it, but then I find it or whatever. It's like things that people just don't fucking care about generally. So like, yeah, I'm just like, no, like there are sounds, like they are audible or they're here. I'm just the one hearing them. And not only am I hearing them, like it's disturbing me. Like it's like causing me distress, it somatically has an impact on me and just kind of like feeling that in my body. I can't focus, like just things like that. So anyway, I was like crying and like I'm just leaving. I was like, I gotta go. Like I don't want to hate telling you talk about this. It's just like it's just so rare. Like it's so rare, and like I'm just like okay. Like rare doesn't mean that things don't happen. Like rare means a rare. But like, what if you're talking to like someone who is rare or like who's experiencing this rarity? Like so. I feel like that's really upsetting to me when like providers are just so dismissive based on things being rare. Um, so, and it's also not rare in the population of autism. So there is a higher prevalence of auditory issues and processing within the autistic population. So there's that too. And then I don't know. I think that's pretty much it on this person's account. And, they wrote like a little summary or whatever and like mailed it to me for like info on tinnitus or something. I think that's what it's called. Um, which is cool. That's nice on the follow up. And then also I saw in the report that they just like documented things wrong. Like it was just like they said I they said I did not endorse a history of ear infections as a child, when I definitely did. I had infections all the time and fevers when I was a kid, and like that's very common in people with auditory processing issues. Um, so yeah, and then like it's just like this is just something that kind of just annoys me a little bit. But they were like, they said something about like how I denied symptomology based on something I read on the internet. And like, okay, there's like a fear that I have in like just kind of advocating for myself and for others around this, and like calling out professionals when they're like, then they don't know like the most current data on things or things like that. It's just like in my chart getting this like persona of like either like a hypochondriac or a malingerer or someone who's like difficult and irritable to work with and like aggressive and things like that. Because I mean I've worked in hospital systems and you'll see that all the time. Like someone when they start challenging doctors, and when they start challenging the health personnel, like suddenly like they're like this like fucking villain who is like terrorizing the hospital system, versus someone who's just like advocating for themselves and saying, no, this isn't what I experience, and this is what what's happening, and that's happening, or you're not listening to me, because it happens all the time, where professionals aren't listening, or they're not even at least they're not even integrating new information. And I could see that, like you're saying, oh yeah, I have 15 minutes, or in some cases, I have an hour or whatever. And yeah, you don't maybe have enough time to take all this information and like integrate it. But that's also why some of these evaluations should not be done in an hour. But we'll get back to that. Um, so that was that. It just kind of annoyed me with the internet piece, because I was just like, yeah, like I mean, I'm on the internet, but we're all on the internet to find information. It's just like, where are you on the internet? Like, and so I'm on the internet, like in like peer-reviewed journals. Like I'm on the internet, like looking at work from doctors and esteemed doctors and in this field. Like I'm on the internet looking at research, and I'm also looking at like how that research was conducted. So yes, I'm on the internet, but I'm not on WebMD. Like I'm not on like fucking Act Jeeves. Like, come on. Like, so it's just like not even like taking the time to like look into those things. Like I feel like it's upsetting to me, especially when you start putting that in documentation, because then it can start to create this persona of someone that is misrepresentative, or of the patient, I should say. Anyway, moving on. So I was like looking for this, trying to get assessed for ADHD. I first met with a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I was a Black woman. I was really happy. I'm like, oh yeah, like Black woman, like this is gonna be great. Oh my god, I left that interview in tears. I barely got through it, but it was really interesting. So like, I sent in my like intake paperwork at least a week ahead of time, maybe a little bit more, at least a week. And like I get on this call, and like the nurse answers, and they're like, oh yeah, like I see like you wanted to come in, for autism or whatever. I don't do that here. But what I do is like look at like depression, anxiety, bipolar, blah 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 blah, like these mood disorders, things like that. And it's just like, okay, first and foremost, if you read this and you don't do this here, why didn't I get a phone call to say, hey, here's a referral? Why didn't I say, hey, I can't help you with this? Maybe here are some resources so you could find someone. But instead, you have me come here to tell me that you can't help me with this. Like, again, like this is money out of people's pockets. Like, it's not free to go to the doctor for everybody, like for most of us. So it's just really frustrating, that sort of negligence. But aside from that, we start the interview and they're like, okay, just answer my questions yes or no, unless I ask for any other like information. And then they just start reading off DSM criteria. Check. You have that, check, check, check. And it's just like, that's not how you diagnose people with anything out of the DSM. You don't just go off the check mark. Like, yeah, you look for those symptoms, but you want to look at the impact of those symptoms. You want to look at the settings of those symptoms. You want to look at the symptoms over the lifespan. You want to compare those symptoms to others, like, to other diagnoses that might have similar systems, and like do that. None of that. And you can't do that in your head by yourself. Like you have to do that in a conversation with somebody else. You can't just be like, oh, did you experience like anger for 2 weeks? Check, done. Like you can't. That's not clinically sound. So that really pissed me off. And like at the end of it, she gave me some diagnoses that like I'm not gonna repeat all of them or whatever, but I was just like, this don't even make sense. She did give me an ADHD diagnosis because I pressed her on it, but again, like she didn't really do a thorough job. It was a check mark thing, whatever. And so but what was interesting for me is that she gave me a cannabis use disorder, which I do smoke weed. And like the thing though, like, is you can't, all she asked me was if I smoked weed. I said, yeah. She said, how often? I said, like, a few times a week. I was like, yeah, no, like, maybe like a gram or something like that. Well, actually, I don't even think I said that because I don't. She didn't ask me. She did not ask me. She just asked me the frequency. But like, yeah. So she asked me if I smoke, and then she asked me the frequency, and then she was like, "That sounds like a lot." And gave me a cannabis use disorder, and I was just like, "That's not how you diagnose a substance abuse disorder at all." There are so many other criteria alone, like about like attempts to quit, like difficulty with quitting, cravings, like, your view of the problem, consequential impact, like that you're having in your life. Are you losing money? Are you like getting arrested? Like just things like that. Are you missing work? Like just all those different things that need to be assessed. And like none of those questions. Just did you use it? How many times? How often? You can't make that sort of diagnosis with just those 2 points of information. Like it's unethical. And so, long story short, I actually did end up reporting the specific nurse because, yeah, just that practice was just unethical. That's not okay to present yourself as a mental health professional and then show up like that. It's a disservice to the community that you are allegedly serving. But funny story is that actually my sister went to her too. And we didn't know, we went to the same person or anything. We just happened to meet up and we were talking about our interviews. And yeah, she had a very similar experience. And then the doctor, like, or not the doctor, then the nurse diagnosed her with bipolar disorder. And it's just like, girl, you are not bipolar. Like, she just doesn't even meet the criteria to be bipolar. Like, and then my sister went and got a second opinion from a psychiatrist who was just like, yeah, you're definitely not bipolar, and diagnosed her with ADHD. Um, so yeah. Anyway, so that was the second kind of, I guess it's second on my list, but I guess I've talked about a few experiences now. Oh, I didn't even talk about the ophthalmology. So I guess I'll back up, like going back to that hospital system that I was with. So I had actually the nurse that I just talked to you about. I had our office send over a report to ophthalmology because I do have issues. Just with my eyes being tired. I already have astigmatism, but just like difficulty walking straight, like neck pain, things like that, and like that could be an eye condition that is more prevalent in ADHD populations. I don't know, but it's something just to look for and to see and to rule out, right? So her office did send that over or whatever. But the thing about the hospital system is, once again, like I had this appointment, and then like come to find it was like a couple months out, and then come to find out like they couldn't even help me. Like they wouldn't help me. They were just like, oh, like, yeah, well, that's a peds thing, basically. Like they didn't have anyone who could see adults to assess for that. And the only reason I didn't actually make it to the appointment to figure this out is because I have a friend that works in the ophthalmology department at that hospital system. They're like, yeah, like you're gonna have to see like someone who does like peds or whatever. And then like basically like the hospital system refused to schedule me with the peds doctor because I'm an adult. So I'm just like, well, like, so just no one can look, like no one can make this judgment call. And like actually the very snotty person on the phone was like, well, we can't give you what we don't have. I'm just like, all right, but you could also like acknowledge that this is an issue. Like you could also tell me where to fucking go, or at least you should be able to. Anyway, so that was that. I found another nurse practitioner to work with, and actually she was really cool. She was really cool, and she was very what's the word? I guess validating, very validating. She did do a more thorough diagnostic for eval for ADHD. She didn't feel comfortable with diagnosing autism. Like she didn't feel like that was her field or her, her tea. But she gave me resources of places to like reach out to and to try to help me out. Although they didn't end up being very helpful for me, I still like applaud her for like telling me where to go and just like just being there. So she was super cool. The problem was that she ghosted me. So that's just long story short. She just kind of stopped showing up to appointments. What she did, she just stopped showing up. So um, yeah, I don't know what happened to her. Hopefully she's okay. That kind of brings me a little bit more present day, where I did find a psychiatrist that is very helpful. And while they don't diagnose, oh, actually, no, let me back up a little bit. I went to another psychiatrist before finding the one that I work with now. And they also, I think, were like really awesome. Like again, like very validating, like just very compassionate and welcoming. But they were in private practice, like private pay. And so again, I was in a really desperate time and I really didn't have the money to do this, but I just thought like it would be helpful. So I did the eval with them, which was like $300, and we met for like an hour. I think she might have went over a little bit over an hour. And at the end of it, she was basically like, "Well, I can't really tell," and I get it. Like it is hard. It is hard to make this diagnosis in adulthood, especially with someone with a trauma history or someone who can very much compensate for social deficits and things like that. So I understand why that might be difficult, and in their practice, like she uses actual like testing and things like that, which isn't necessary per se to make a diagnosis. It's not a requirement, but it can be helpful. So she was like, "Yeah, we would have to do tests, and those tests would have been out of pocket for me, and I just didn't even have that money to scrap up to give her for that. So that just didn't work out for me. But she was a very pleasant doctor. Um, Side note, again, I just really don't understand though in general how anyone can conduct like a 60-minute assessment to determine neurodiverse conditions or not, or neurodivergent conditions or not. So then they say, well, if it's really obvious, and it's just like, I don't know. I feel like if you're looking for things that are really obvious, you're looking for stereotypes more often than not, and versus like a wide array of like heterogeneous like symptomology, right? But that still fit within this criteria. And so, yeah, personally, I I just feel like it has to be longer than an hour, especially if you're not taking insurance. Like I get like if you're taking insurance, you kind of have to work under those insurance guidelines. And so like yeah, maybe you need multiple interviews or whatever. But to not take insurance and to not have a more thorough diagnostic process, I personally feel is a disservice, or just not very helpful. Um, so yeah, present day, I have a psychiatrist that is pretty wonderful. Though they do not do autism diagnoses, but they definitely like seem to like endorse just kind of like what I'm thinking or whatever, or just kind of like um, not saying no, but just kind of saying okay, well that is your life experience. This is like what can we do to help? Diagnoses or no diagnoses. Like how can we work with this? And so we definitely really did get on a good med regimen to help to manage my ADHD, and also I feel like they did a really good job at like expectation setting and like what are my expectations even for these meds. And they really helped me by doing that with like numbers and like saying, okay, well, if this improves, by like 50% or whatever, then we're going to say this is successful, or 40% of this or whatever, versus like in the beginning when I first kind of went into it, like I was looking for something to basically like get rid of my ADHD or like stop that. Like that's not realistic. So they really did help me with expectation setting, and also just like helping me with meds to help manage anxiety, and also meds to help kind of with sensory issues, which has been very helpful. Like I've been able to just go places and not freak out if I didn't bring my glasses with me, my sunglasses with me, or things like that. I've definitely had a higher tolerance to um, sensory input than I did just about a year ago. All right. So this brings me to my last and most recent experience, y'all, which I just feel like is wild. It's wild.